CSIS 2440 is filmed before a live studio audience.
All right, so let's sort of pick up where we left off last time, with one exception. 2 videos ago, we added this little thing here where if we check that box, it grays that drop down out. And then if we uncheck it, it ungrays it out. We just use a little JavaScript. But I noticed a little bug and we didn't fix it, so we're gonna fix it. It'll just take 2 seconds to do it. If I check that and I don't put a word in, then I will get my proper error message, but this gets ungrayed out, right? We need it to stay grayed out because the checkbox stayed. So all we gotta do is every time we load this page, just check to see if the box is checked. That's it. And we already have a function for that. We built it in our JavaScript. So if we go here into JavaScript, this is the function we built called disable dropdown. And if you look in our index file, right here on input, on the checkbox, every time they click it, we run that function. Well, I can just run that function every time we load the page. That'll solve the problem. So we'll just copy that right here and change it to on load, and poof, that'll solve the problem. That's all there is to it. And again, that function, all it does is it sees if the box is checked. If it is, then gray out the drop down. If it is, and then if it gets unchecked, then ungray it out. So now, if I refresh the page, this should get grayed out again. Problem solved, right? Really easy fix. All right, so close out the JavaScript. Don't need that anymore. And let's move into what we're really here for, which is the database stuff. We started last week, we got connected, and I just want to do a quick recap so we understand exactly what's going on here. This was just me echoing out the actual location of what server we're on. So this whole block of code here has one purpose. It is just to define some constants that we're going to use later. So define constants for connecting. So what happens if we are on the if the actual URL is localhost, like the www.whatever, if it's localhost instead of www.whatever, then we're going to set up these 4 constants to equal these 4 values. If, on the other hand, we're anything else, literally anything else, as long as it's not just plain localhost, then we're going to use those credentials and set up these parameters here. Then down here we make the connection. So this was step 1. Down here, step 2 is connect to the database. Step 3, we're writing a query or some kind of command. And again, step 2 here, we could have directly put in there localhost and root and 15, whatever it is, right? But we want to be able to do it based on which server we're on. That's why we did this little trick here. All right, so we connect. We now have a variable that is the connection. Then we write a query and we just put it into a variable called SQL. And then step 4 is we run the query by using this MySQL query underscore query function here. We pass in the connection, we pass in the actual command. That returns to another variable called results, right? So now by the end of step 4 here, we've got this results variable that has all of the content from the database that we pulled out. And then step 5 here, if we grab the data from the database, then we may need to loop through it and do something. In this case, we're just spitting out the data. And then step 6, which I forgot to tell you guys, which is probably one of the most important steps, close the connection. You don't want to leave your database connection hanging, right? So the command for that, let's write the note here, close connection. Okay, the command for that is MySQL I, don't forget the I, close. And then you just pass in the connection. That'll close the connection, right? I've never had any serious issues happen where anything crazy happened for forgetting to close the connection, which I do forget to do all the time. But I have had issues where I'm trying to use another connection somewhere else in the code and there's a conflict because I didn't close the other one. So just make sure you close the connection. All right, so before we move on to the new stuff today, any questions about these steps here, about any line of code on this page here? What we're going to do now is we're going to move this over to our Palindrome project, and we're going to come up with some ideas on what we can do with it, okay? But before we do, we need to take a crash course in SQL commands, okay? Some of you have taken my 1550 class or some other database classes, and you may be prepared for that. So if you doze off over the next few minutes, I won't be offended. Okay? But this is just sort of a crash course for those who are not familiar with it. So line 22 here. This is one SQL command. We haven't done much more than that, right? We're going to look at a handful of them, and I'm going to give you just enough to make yourself dangerous as a PHP programmer, okay? So believe me, you could take an entire course on this, and there are several courses on it. So if we go over to the lecture notes for today, right here, crash course in MySQL. Every time I hear the word crash course, I think of that old Crash Course in Brain Surgery. You guys remember that song? Metallica did a cover of it back in the day. So right here, first of all, we got this fabulous acronym we're going to learn about, and we got some commands here that'll kind of help us out. This is right in the lecture notes, so feel free to use this as a little guide. But let's talk about this acronym for a minute. CRUD, right? CRUD. There's another one I also use, but it's maybe less politically correct. DUIs. It also works, so I'll fill that in for you. So the D stands for, you can probably guess, delete. The U stands for update. The I is for insert, yeah, and the S is for select. Now, the reason there are two different ones here. They both mean the same thing. CRUD is the most common one you will see in the industry. DUIs is one I made up, okay? But CRUD, the reason that's more typical in the industry is because those four things, that is everything you can do in a database. You cannot do anything other than those four things in a database. You can create stuff, you can retrieve stuff, you can update stuff, update, modify, change, right? And you can delete stuff. That's it. What is the stuff? Users, tables, databases, fields, records, all that, constraints, primary keys, foreign keys, all this kind of stuff. You can create and retrieve and update and delete all those things, and that's it. The reason I like the second one here is because this one, although it's the same thing, deleting, updating, inserting, and selecting, those are the actual specific commands that you will use when you are writing commands on a table, okay? If you're creating a table, like from scratch, you don't have a table and you're going to create one, the command is actually called create. But if you're going to create a record inside of a table, you actually use insert. So I prefer this one when we're talking about dealing with actual records, okay? So if we go back here and we copy this into our text editor just for fun. So this is the first three parts of CRUD. We're not really going to deal with delete. And the reason for that, generally speaking, you don't delete records. The only time I ever use delete is in a development database that I'm just testing stuff and I put fake records in it, and then I'm ready to launch it and go live, I delete all my fake records. That's the only time I ever use delete. Most companies, what they'll do is they'll sort of archive a record or they'll flag it, but they won't get rid of it. So let's start at the middle one here, retrieve, because it's the simplest one overall. And the way this is made, all these bold commands here, those are the actual commands. Select, from, where. The rest of this is sort of my notes to you, if you will. So we're going to select, that's a command, some fields, from some tables, and in our case, we're only going to do one table at a time. So no joins, if you know what those are, we're not going to deal with that. Where some conditions are true. Okay, so let's look at that in a real database here. This is one that I use for my 1550 class. If you've taken it, you'll be familiar. So let's use the towel database. This is a fake toy manufacturing company. They have 5 tables: the customer table, the item table, order line, orders, and rep. So if I wanted to look at the sales reps, for example, I would use that command called select. And these are actually called clauses. The select clause, the from clause, the where clause. There are a lot of clauses, right? There's a dozen or so, but we're just going to focus on these 3. So select some fields. Which fields do I want in this case? I want all of them. All the fields from some table. Which table? The rep table, okay? So what this is doing here, it's getting all of these fields. These are the fields from the table called rep. It only happens to have 4 people in it, okay? Here's the part that confuses a lot of people when they're new to this. This star right here, people think it means all of the records. But it does not mean all of the records. It means all of the fields, okay? Notice I left off the where clause. The where clause is what determines which records you get back. So let's stop there for a minute and do another one where I say select, and instead of saying everything, I'm going to say just select last name and first name from Tal. Okay? Yeah, thank you. Typo. Don't know what I was thinking there. That's what I meant to say. So notice here that it says, it just shows me the last name and the first name, but it shows me all 4 records, right? Because the star here at the top, that does not mean give me all the records. It means give me all the fields. Well, down here I said, oh, just give me these 2 fields. So remember our format here. Select some fields from some table. So I selected those 2 fields from some table called rep. Make sense? Now we can filter this. That's what the where clause comes in. The where clause filters it down. So let's go back to selecting all the fields. Select star from rep. Now we're going to add on a where clause. Where, let's say rate is equal to 0.06. All right, that's this field over here, the rate field. And we're going to end up getting just the first record and these last 2 here. Okay, and that just shows those 3. So I'm still getting all of the fields, but only some of the records. So again, select some fields from some table where some condition is true. What's the condition that's true in this case? Rate is equal to 0.06, right? Now you can add and or and other things. There's tons of other things you can add to the where clause. We're going to keep it simple though, but I want this one where rate is 06 and commission is greater than 0. Okay, so that's going to eliminate Janet here. Janet does not have a commission, and so she is a rate of 06, but she has 0, and so she's going to be eliminated from that query there. As you can see, it only shows those 2 people. Dig it?
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
What we can also do here is instead of an and, I can do or. So if I do or, any guesses what will happen? Here's our original full table right here at the top. So which records am I going to get? We'll get everything. Yeah, we'll get everything. So let's do this. Let me clear this out. So let's do a select star with no where clause just to get the full table back on the screen here. So there's a full table. Here's the command we're going to run. And the consensus we just had is it's going to show everything. And here's why. First thing that we do is we say select all of the fields from rep. Okay, so we got all of this. We're good. Then we say where the rate is equal to 0.06 or the commission is greater than 0. So we start here. Is the rate 06? Yep, you're good. We go. This is like a loop, right? It's just looping through the database. Next up, we get here and we go, are you greater than 06? No. But are you greater than 0 here? Yep, so you're in the list. Next one, are you 06? Yep, you're in the list. Are you 06? Yep, you're in the list. So all 4 of them will end up being in the list. Okay? Pretty straightforward. That is literally the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg about select statements. Okay, we actually have about, I think we cover that for like 3 or 4 weeks in the actual 1550 class, right? There's a lot more to it. But that's a good start, and it's all you'll need for this class. Okay, so any questions on the select? Okay, next up, we've got the retrieving records. That's the R out of CRUD. We're going to save create for last. Okay, update. So update is very similar in structure, right? It has an update clause. So you're going to update some table, and then you're going to set some fields equal to some values where some condition is true. Okay, so let's go with Janet here, and let's say that she decided to change her last name. Maybe she got married and also wanted to change her name. So we'll say update, and we want to update the rep table, right? Update some table, and then we want to set last name equal to, she's now Jones, let's say, okay? Where, well, let's stop right there. Since all of you guys have taken this already, you know what'll happen. What if I push the button right now? What's going to happen? Yeah, suddenly everybody's last name is Jones, right? That's what the where clause is for, to filter that. So we say where what? Yeah, that's definitely a better way to do it. So what's wrong with this one? Yeah, remember this table is only 4 records. In reality, it's probably hundreds of records, and there may be more than one Janet. So if I did that, everybody named Janet would suddenly be now Jones. So what we want to do is key it off of a field that has no possibility of duplication, which is in this case the rep number, which is probably their ID, their employee ID or something like that. So the way this would work normally, either Janet is in my office saying, hey, can you update my record? Or somebody told me to do it and they've got Janet's information or whatever. So I will ask them this. I will say, okay, what is Janet's current name? And they'll say Janet Sefton. So I'll say select star from rep where first name is Janet and last name is Sefton. And then this record will come up, and there may be two Janet Seftons, you never know. But this record will come up and I will ask Janet, is that you? Is that who you are? Is that your address? And then Janet says yes, and then I say, okay, so you're rep number 60. Now we can do this. Update rep set last name equal to Jones, where rep num is 60. Notice that it went in all caps because that's how I did it here, okay? This is where we get into an important issue with case sensitivity. Case sensitivity is weird in a database, okay? The field names and the table names and even the database names are case sensitive, but the records are not. So notice up here in this query, when I said where first name equals Janet, all caps, and last name equals Sefton, all caps, it returned this record because the field names are not case sensitive. I'm sorry, the field data is not case sensitive. The field names are case sensitive if you're on a Linux box, right? This machine is not a Linux box. And so if I say, let's do it all lowercase, select star from lowercase rep, works just fine. If I say select star from uppercase rep, also works just fine. If I run a Linux box, would not work. And what are your servers? Your remote servers? They're Linux, yeah, they're Linux box. So you have to be careful with the case sensitivity, right? Okay, so questions on the update statement. Now you can do multiple things. I can change plenty of things. Let's just say that update rep set city equal to Boston, state equal to Massachusetts, and postal code equal to, I don't know, Boston postal code. That. Where, let's do rep num is equal to 15. So what we're doing here is we're setting up this person, rep 15, moved, Rafael Campos, and that's the new address. Of course, we'd want to change the street too, but let's just leave that alone for a moment. And now, if we do a select on this, we now see that he now is in Boston, Massachusetts, with that zip code right there, okay? You can also do math, right? So let's give everybody a pay raise. Update rep set rate equal to rate times 1.1. What's that going to do? Should give them a 10% raise, yep. If I just do it across the board, I could do that and it'll give it to everybody. Or I could say where commission is greater than 0. That way we don't give a pay raise to Janet who hasn't got any sales yet. There we go. Select star from rep. And now these guys went up to 0.7. This one went up to 0.9. So it went from 0.8. And Janet stayed at 0.6 until she gets a sale. So lots of cool things you can do with the update statement. Again, the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg here, right? That's the R and the U of CRUD. Let's look at the C. C is a different structure, okay? So the way this works, you're inserting into some particular table some specific fields that you're going to insert into the following values, okay? So it looks like this. Insert into rep, so that's insert into some table. And then the fields, right, which are, in this case, we'll do last name, first name, and notice I'm doing this out of order. Rep num. The order of this does not matter as long as the values are in the same order as what you put here. Does that make sense? So we'll see that in action here. So we have a new employee that just moved into town, doesn't know his his address, yet he's staying in a hotel till he gets a place. So we're just going to leave everything else blank. We're just going to insert the last name and the first name. And then, so we have insert into some table, rep, these fields, last name, first name, and rep number, the following values. Well, the values are values. Last name is Johnson. Now that's the first name. Beavis. And then the rep number is 75, right? That's it. So notice that Johnson is going to go to last name, Beavis will go to first name, and rep number will go to rep number, right? If I change the order of these, if I change this to be first name and this to be last name, then I would have to change the order here as well. As long as the order in the values matches this order, it's fine. Okay, and notice I don't have to use all the fields either. There we go. If I do a select star, you'll see that all this is null because it wasn't given at the moment. And then this is the name and the rep number. Okay, we can later add that in. We can do an update statement and add it in as we get the information. Now notice though, there's no where clause. Why is there no where clause? The fact that I'm inserting it is the where. The where is because I'm the human that's been told I'm supposed to put this person in the database. There is no condition upon which they get entered, right? Okay, so those are the three commands we're going to deal with, and that's really it for this class. So now that we have that sort of under our belt, and again, if you want to refer back to that, feel free to go to the lecture notes for today, and it's all right in here, okay? So now we're going to move all this into the database, into the palindrome thing here. Typically the way I do this, here's my DB test that we did the other day, and here is our palindrome site. Typically I will have in my includes folder a file called db.php. So I'm just going to copy, this is the actual, this index on the left, that is the database stuff we did the other day. Then I'm going to rename that to db. All right, let's close this, and we'll open this up here. So what I'll typically do is this. This whole thing is, what I want this DB file to be is just a file that connects me to the database. That's all it does. And then later, I'll use that connection to do other things. So this DB file does not need any of this garbage here. Okay, none of that needs to be there. This is just all about connecting, right? And so not only that, but what I usually do is start off this way, where I define the constants, and then I make this a function. Okay, and then this function returns the connection, and I'll just use that connection somewhere else in my code. All right, so for example, we'll just call this function connect to DB. Good enough. And this will reach out and grab those constants right there, and we'll just simply return the connection like that. So later in my code somewhere, when I need a database connection, I can just grab that one. Okay, and we'll see how that plays out in just a minute. So now that we have some sort of database connected to our palindrome site, what can we do with it? There's one more that I'm thinking of, which is use the DB as the default instead of that text file, right? Okay, so we could just simply display the database, right? Like here's the default list if you want to see what's in it. Okay. Well, this one you're going to do on your homework, so I'm not going to do that one for you. Nice try though. All right, and then so put the user input into the database, and when we do that, we're actually going to we're going to compare it so we don't enter duplicates. So that'll be kind of one and the same. Use the database as a default and then display it on a separate page. So doing this will be pretty easy. It'll just be, we can add another page to our navigation and then just display. We've already done the display, right? That's what we did the other day, okay? So let's start here. Let's start with putting the input from the user into the database. So that all happens, if you'll recall. By the way, when we're done with this function here, append to text file, we can delete that. We can also delete this get palindromes text file. We won't need those anymore, okay? So I'll clean up our code a little bit. But down here in the get palindrome page content, what happens? We get, if the checkbox was checked, then we get the defaults from the text file. Otherwise, we get the default, we get the stuff that was input, and then we append it to the text file. Okay, well, in order to get the defaults from the text file, or from the database instead of the text file, we can replace this line of code with some new function that gets it out of the database. And down here, instead of appending it to the text file, we can add it to the database, right? So we can comment this one out. And let's start here with this. Do we want to put everything in the database or just palindromes? Just palindromes, okay. That being the case, there's a better place to do it than right here. There is a function that you'll recall called isPalindrome, right? That returns true if it's a palindrome, doesn't it? So why not, in that function, if it's about to return true, stick it in the database, right? Does that make sense? So let's go down here to isPalindrome. Where are you at? Right here, very small function. And right here, it's going to return true. So right before it returns true, let's just stick it in the database. That's easy enough. We'll just do it here. Right before the return, we're going to say add to DB. That's a function we're going to make in a minute. And then we'll close it out. That's really all there is to it, right? We need to pass in the thing that's going to be added to the DB, which is what? Yeah, phrase. That's the word that was passed in that's being tested at the moment. But there's a little bit of an issue. So what's happening in this code? We have this word that's being passed in, and then we clean the word by doing all this where we remove the spaces and everything, and we reassign it to phrase. So now phrase is the stripped down version. I don't want to input the stripped down version. I want to input the full version with all the punctuation and everything. Follow what I'm saying? So let's leave it this way for a minute so we can see what happens, and then we'll change it in a second, all right? We'll go ahead and add phrase in here. That's what we're going to insert. And let's go up to the very top and build the add to DB function. Okay, very top here. And we have function add to DB, and we'll just, whatever the word or the phrase is, right? So what do we need? We need a connect, right? So first of all, we can do con equals, what was that function called? It was called connect to DB, right? So we're making a new variable here called con, connect to DB. Now, this connection that's made right here will get sent to right here. And now this variable is a connection, and now I can use it right here. Right now, this function can't see it because we're not including this. It's not in our includes anywhere, right? So we need to include this. And we can put it right here in our function file if we want, or we can just include it in our important stuff, right? So we'll go into important stuff, and right here we can just include db.php, right? So now this is included in this file that we're looking at, and this is the function file right here. Or, oh, sorry, not that one. We don't need that anymore. This is the function file right here, and this function is going to be included right here. And so because this is here and this is here, we now have access to everything in here, and we have access to it right here. Now I could just use the global con variable, right? But I like doing it in function and passing the value around. So does that make sense what I'm doing there? Yep. So to clarify, if I decided not to make this a function, right? Just leave this not a function and not return anything, but just have this one line here, then this would be a variable that I could get as a global variable and just use it right here, right? I just don't like using global variables if I don't have to. Okay, so we got this connection. Now the next step is I need to insert into the database, okay? So let's make a query here where we'll just call it insert. And just like we learned a minute ago, insert into palindrome. And we're going to be inserting into the field called phrase. And what are we inserting? P. Yeah, very good. P. Right? Now that's not quite the right syntax there. We'll fix that in a second. But we're inserting P. Well, there needs to be quotes around P because it's a string. Right? When you're doing an insert statement, there has to be quotes around it. That's still not correct. Right? I need to concatenate all this. So we're going to close that and like so. So now this will say insert into palindrome phrase, the phrase field value whatever P is. And then we got a semicolon there. So here is how you test this stuff, okay? Before you do anything else, we're going to echo the insert variable so I can see what it looks like when it spits it out, okay? Let's start there. So we're gonna run this. This will be on the palindrome page when they enter a palindrome. So we go to and dog, and we'll say Bob and Madam. Okay, so it says insert into palindrome phrase values Bob, and then another one, Madam. That looks like what I'm looking for, right? So now to really test it, we now know our PHP is doing what we thought it would, right? Now what we want to do is test to make sure the SQL is actually correct as well. So you'll put it directly into your database. Okay, so you go to your champ here, or if you want, just go directly to localhost, and then you can click here on phpMyAdmin there. And then go into the palindromes database, and into the palindrome table, and into the SQL tab up here at the top, and then paste that in there and see if it works properly. And it appears to have worked properly. So now I know that my code works, that my PHP generated the correct query or the correct command, and that the command is correct as far as SQL goes. So now that we have that, now we can actually run it. So now all we got to do is simply say MySQLi query, pass in the connection, pass in the insert statement, and also MySQLi close the connection. That should do it. That really is all there is to it. Okay, now we got some issues we got to fix, but that's the basic idea here. So let's go back here, and if I refresh this page, it should add Bob and Madam again. Right now they're in there, Bob, Bob, Madam. If I refresh it, now when I refresh the database, I got Bob and Madam again. So that's it, it's working. Now we have duplicate issues there, okay? Also notice this. Put one palindrome. If I do Madam, I'm Adam, and I submit, look what gets entered into our database. The whole thing with no punctuation or anything. That's the problem we were talking about a minute ago. So if we go down here, all the way at the bottom, this is where that's occurring. So the way to fix this phrase at the moment on line 170 is in its pure form that it started with the punctuation and everything, right? And then suddenly, all that goes away on line 173. Agreed? So we want to capture it right before that occurs. That's what we want to pass into the insert function. Dig it?
Can you dig it?
So what I would do is something like this. We'll leave phrase alone, and we'll say like, you know, clean phrase or something like that is equal to whatever the clean version of phrase is. And then down here, instead of using phrase, when we reverse it, we're going to reverse clean phrase. And then if reverse phrase equals clean phrase, we'll insert the original phrase into the function. Make sense? Okay, so now when we refresh this page, we should get a new Madam I'm Adam with the proper punctuation and everything. And we do. Cool. But now we got a duplicates problem still, right? So how do we solve that problem? Let's think about this for a minute. This function here, the whole reason we write functions is so that they do all the work. And so this line here is just calling some function that adds to the database. Well, typically we know if you're adding to a database, you don't want duplicate records. That's just a thing. You don't purposely make duplicate records. So why not modify our add to database function up here to deal with duplicates as well, right? Right in here. So here we're grabbing the connection, grab connection. Here we're writing the command. Here we're running the command. And here we're closing the connection. Well, before we do this, we should check to see if there's any duplicates. So how do we do that? We basically need to compare P to everything in the database, right? So let's grab everything from the database, right? Maybe we should make a function that returns everything in the database, right? So let's do that real quick. And then we're going to run this. Now you'll recall before when we ran something like this, we assigned it to a variable called result, right? And of course we're going to use this variable here, SQL, not insert. Why did I do that here but not up here? Exactly right. In line 11, it will actually return like a true or something, letting you know that it worked and everything, or an error code or whatever, but we don't need that information for what we're doing right now. But on line 21, we definitely need to, we're returning some actual records here, so we need to capture those, right? And then we have the next step, which is doing the while loop. So we'll say like while record, I used row last time, but whatever, equals MySQL I fetch array, remember that one? And we pass in the results, and what was the other thing we put in there? So there's MySQL underscore ASSOC for associative array. There's MySQL both, which means you'll get it back as both an associative array and an indexed array. And then there's another one for just getting it back as an indexed array. I can't remember what the constant is for that, but that is an option too. But I like getting it as associative array, so it's MySQL I ASOC, right? So while that's occurring, we're going to build a return variable here called ret, an array of whatever's in the database. Does that make sense? Okay, so at the end of that loop there, then we will return. So the whole point of this is just get the data, because we're going to use this again later to display the data on another page as well. So get the data. So now I have a variable that's an array that's full of all of these things inside of right here, okay? So up here in this other function, now we want to do this where I want to say get the data and see if there's any duplicates. Don't forget to close your connection though. MySQL I close connection. So right up here, we're going to create an array that has all the words in it or something, or phrases or whatever, and it's going to be equal to get pal database. That make sense? So this phrases will now have all of this, just those words. Then we're going to loop through it, okay? And we'll just do a for each loop. For each phrases as phrase, and we're going to compare phrase to P, right? So if phrase equals P, then we want to break out. So I want to break out, but I also want to do something that says, hey, don't run this. Now we can't just simply try to put this up here in the if statement, because remember, yeah, we're running it as many times as there are records in the database, and that would mean it would run every single time that there is no match, which will be all but one record, right? So we don't want that. So what I would do in a situation like this is make some sort of a flag. Like if it matches, then we'll say like, yeah, oh, that's a good one. Yeah, we'll call duplicate equals true, and then we'll break, right? So before that, we're going to right here, we'll set the duplicate to false. Duplicate equals false, right? So we have this variable called duplicate that's going to be every iteration of the for each loop. And then if we get a match, we set duplicate equal to true, and then we break out of the loop, break out of everything. Then down here, we simply say if duplicate's false, do this, right? That make sense? So we'll just say if not duplicate, then do that. I should do it. So let's test this out. Right now we have Madam I'm Adam in there. So let's go ahead and just do a refresh on that, and it should not add it. Let's check and see. Ooh, we get tons of errors. Awesome. Undefined variable results. Oh yeah, okay. So that was on, what line was that? Line 35. Yeah, right here. Yeah, I did a typo there. See that? Result versus results. So we'll change that to a results. Okay, refresh that. Okay, and let's refresh it one more time. And that should not have added anything. And as we refresh it, you can see Madam I'm Adam did not get entered another time. So there is still another issue though, okay? Right now in here I have Madam I'm Adam. What if the user does this? One palindrome, and they say, Madam I'm Adam, all lowercase there, right? If we do this, that is a duplicate, but it's going to get added. You'll see if we look here, it got added, right? That's easy. That's why we have that clean word function, right? So all we got to do is just compare clean word of phrase to clean word of P, right? That'll get rid of all the punctuation. And so now what it's going to look for, to find that Madam I'm Adam is a duplicate, it's actually going to find it right there that it's a duplicate. It's going to find it, well, it'll find it here too. It'll find it on the first one right there. Either way, if I refresh the page, no more Madam I'm Adams will be added. So here we go, we'll refresh it. And I'll refresh this. And no more Madam I'm Adams are added. And let's just spell it a completely different way, just to make sure. In fact, let's do a big test here. We'll do like 3, where we'll try to enter, let's see, race car is not in there at the moment, so we'll add race car. We'll add Madam I'm Adam, like that. And we'll add race car again. Ooh, that's a good one. We'll test that in a minute. Let's do chicken, which is not a palindrome. And so if our code is working properly, race car should be the only thing that makes it in there. Hopefully. Let's take a peek. And only race car made it. So excellent question. Let's try putting, let's do a new palindrome here. We'll do 2 dog. And let's find one that's not already in there. Let's do none. Okay, and so hopefully only one of those will end up in there. Hopefully. Let's see. Yes. So the next thing is the default button. When I click this, right now it's still pulling from that list. So let's see what that looks like. Madam I'm Adam, Beavis, Redivider, Bob, and Madam. Those are already all in there. Redivider, Bob, and Madam are all there. So nothing should have changed. And it looks like nothing changed. Okay. So let's clear out the duplicates now that we've got it working properly. Let's get rid of that. Oh, that's good. We'll get rid of Bob. In fact, let's just clear the whole thing. Check it all. Delete. Okay, so now if we refresh this page with the default, then those new ones will get added, but Beavis will not, of course. And awesome. Oh yeah, okay. This is, I knew we were going to run into this. I just forgot about it. So what's going on here is the database is empty, right? So because the database is empty, our DB thing returned an error, right? Returned nothing. Okay, so it's still inserted, but there's no duplication allowed to be checked, right? So that's easy enough to fix. Right here, when we get the DB here, down here, you can actually see if any records were returned. Okay, if you'll recall, let's do a var dump of this. Okay, so let's go back and refresh the page. Those errors will go away because the database is no longer empty. And here's a var dump. And you'll notice there is this field here called num rows, right? You can look at that and see if it's more than 0, right? This is the results, right? This object, the MySQL results, okay? So you can actually look at that, or there's actually a function that lets you look at it, and it's called MySQL num rows, okay? And that will actually give you this value right here for. So just to demonstrate that, let's add another record so that there are 5 records here. So we'll just quickly do insert, and we will do noon. And now there are 5 records in the table. So now you can see there are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I refresh this, that number 4 will change to 5. Because it's just the number of rows that are being returned, right? So with that, we can actually check right here, number of rows of results. If that number is 0, then we don't want to do anything. We just want to return false, right? So if not that, which means 0 or false, then we just want to return false, okay? Otherwise, we'll just keep going and return all this stuff. Dig it?
Can you dig it?
So this means if the database is empty, return false, which means up here, we're going to get a false. So now, we'll just say if not phrases, or if phrases, do that for each loop, which, by the way, I don't even need curly braces. I'm going to do it just so we don't throw anybody off, but you don't need them. In fact, I could remove every single one of those curly braces right there. Do you guys realize that? Yep. I might do it just for fun. Okay, so that should fix the problem when the database is empty. Let's go back here and clear it out. Check all. And I'm going to remove that var dump because that'll give us an error too, because now it's going to have nothing to dump out. So let's get rid of that var dump down here. And now if I refresh this, let's go home and use the default list. And now it's going to check for duplicates, but because there's nothing in the table right now, then it'll just return false and it won't bother checking. And undefined variable duplicate, we'll fix that in a minute. But now everything else should have worked just fine, okay? That duplicate variable, that's going to be right here, right? So we will want to put this inside of this section here. So we'll just put that inside of there, because if there is no phrases, then we don't care about doing any of this stuff. So as long as we got phrases, then we'll run the for each loop, we'll create the insert, and if the duplicate thing is false, then we'll go ahead and insert it. And down here, we'll close the connection. And one last time, let's just dump the database here. Check all, delete. Yes. Refresh, and we should get no errors. And the data should be added. Except it didn't. Oh, yeah, because we still want to run this command. If there's nothing in the database, then there's definitely no duplicates, right? So we can do one of two things. We can say, if not phrases, then duplicate equals false. We could do that. Or the other thing we could do, this needs to be outside of it either way we look at it, okay? This needs to be down here. Put this back where we had it, okay? So I want to make sure you understand what the problem there is. Let me clean this up and I'll talk about what's going on here. When we ran this, no errors, but nothing got inserted. The reason nothing got inserted is because this insert statement was inside of this if phrases block. Well, there were no phrases because the database was empty. So these two lines never got ran because they were here. Well, we need them to be run if the database is empty, right? Because that means there are definitely no duplicates. They all need to be inserted. Does that make sense? That being the case, right now if I leave it, this is going to give me an error because the duplicate variable doesn't even exist, right? Because it was created inside of this if statement here, or inside of the for each loop here, right? So a way to fix that is, in the event that phrases is empty, set duplicate equal to false, and then we're good. Or down here, you can check to see if it's not even set. So I can just do that. If not is set, duplicate, or it's false, right? So we can use the is set. So if it's not set, or it's false. Does that make sense? Okay, so here we go. Let's try it again. Right now there's nothing in the database, so let's refresh it. All these things should have now just been added to the database, and they were. And if I refresh it again, they should not be added because they're duplicates at this point. And they were not. So that problem we just solved. Do you guys feel okay about that? You understand what the problem was there? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any questions about anything we've done? I'm seeing nods over here. What's going on?
Just talking about Janet.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's been getting married. That's why she doesn't have any sales. She's been busy. All right.